Jake Harper didn't think much about what came after death. Why bother, when life itself was full of its own puzzles? But as it turned out, he didn't have much time to think about anything as the headlights of an oncoming truck barreled toward him. The last thing he remembered was a blinding flash of light and the jolt of impact. Then darkness. When he finally opened his eyes, Jake found himself sprawled on a bed of moss, surrounded by towering trees and an eerie mist clinging to the ground. Somewhere in the distance, a creature screeched, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. He sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings. It was like something straight out of a fantasy novel. And it wasn't just a landscape. As Jake picked himself up, brushing moss off his jeans, he realized he was holding something unusual, something familiar yet entirely impossible. In his hand was his grandfather's Colt .45, gleaming as if it had just come off the assembly line. He'd inherited it years ago and kept it as a keepsake, but now it felt alive in his grip. "All right, Jake," he muttered to himself. "Either you've gone nuts, or you're really not in Kansas anymore." He started walking, trying to ignore the eerie feeling that someone or something was watching him. Every step seemed to echo in the silence. That's when he heard it, a low growl behind him. Jake whirled around, heart pounding, to find himself face to face with what looked like a wolf, only twice the size and with eyes that glowed like embers. Without thinking, Jake raised his hand, and another weapon appeared, a shotgun this time, heavy and familiar. He didn't have time to wonder where it had come from, only that it felt like it had always been his. With a single pull of the trigger, the force erupted in a deafening blast, and the creature slumped to the ground. Jake stood there, his heart racing, mind spinning. Guns? Really? He'd always thought if he ended up in some kind of fantasy world, he'd have to deal with swords and shields, maybe throw a few spells. But here he was, apparently with the ability to summon weapons no one in this world had likely even imagined. And so, Jake Harper, the man who never believed in anything beyond the world he knew, started his journey in a land of magic and monsters, carrying with him the firepower of an arsenal straight out of the 21st century.